we're gonna learn a little bit together, and I'll talk a little more about the things that we do. So we're very used to having, to talk about inspiration in Jewish text and Jewish tradition for things like social justice. We know where to look for it. We know to go to the prophets. There are so many pieces in the prophets that we know by heart and that are used not only by Jews when we talk about social justice, but everybody uses them. We don't really know enough about inspiration in our text in the Torah for women's leadership. Usually it's not something that's taught even in Hebrew school or day school, but there are actually a few stories about women stepping up and being leaders at the time of the Torah, at the time of the prophets, etc. We're going to look at one example, and we'll see what is important in that story and how we can learn from it, and how a story like that is inspiration for the things that we do today. So please look at your text sheet. The first page is from the book of Numbers, and it tells the following. We're going to go right into it, okay? So it tells us following. The daughters of Tzelophehad, the son of Chefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menashe, of the families of Menashe, the son of Joseph, came forward. And his daughters' names were Machla, Noah, Chogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. I'm sure you know someone who's named Tirzah, someone who's named Milcah. This is where, or Noah, of course, is a very common name, and this is where the names come from. They stood before Moses and before Elazar the Kohen, and before the chieftains and the entire congregation at the entrance to the tent of meeting, saying, "Our father died in the desert, but he was not in the assembly that banded together against the Lord in Korach's assembly, but he died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should our father's name be eliminated from his family because he had no son? Give us a portion along with our father's brothers." Now we need to understand, this is the book of Numbers. They're on the verge of leaving the desert and coming into the land of Israel. The land of Israel was divided amongst the tribes. Each tribe got a piece of a large territory. The territories were divided up into families, and the family territory was divided, the larger family territory was divided up into the smaller family pieces of land. All this was done according to the males in the family. A family was defined, and probably still is, by the men. So the daughters of Tzlophehad had 5 daughters. He died in the desert. They're on the verge of entering the country. All 5 are not married. We know that because the Torah comes later on to tell us who they married. But all 5 are not married. They're on the verge of coming into the land of Israel, and they're not going to have any land because they have no brothers. If they had had a brother, he would have gotten a piece of land, and they would live off that piece of land. They have no brothers. Their father is dead. They have no sons because they're all unmarried and they don't have any children. They're about to enter the country, and they don't know what they're going to live on. So they approach Moshe and they come to ask him, what should we do? Our father's name is going to be forgotten. P.S. It hasn't, because of the Torah. Our father's name is going to be forgotten, and we don't have where to live. Now, there's this huge assembly. Think of it. These 5 young women are coming together in the tent and everyone's around there, that the Torah is very clear on that. It says they stood before Moses, and before Elazar the Kohen, and before the chieftains, and the entire congregation at the entrance to the tent of meeting. This isn't a private consultation. The 5 of them came and approached Moshe before everyone and asked for a piece of land. Now, if you're Moshe, if you're Moses, what would you do? These 5 women don't have what to live off, don't have what to live from. What would you do?
Quickly marry them off.
He did that 2 chapters later, but not at this point. But one of the ideas would be to make sure that they were connected to a certain man. Okay, you'll be with this family, you'll be with that family, you'll be with that family. That's not what Moshe did.
Consult with Hashem.
So Moshe decided to consult with Hashem. Now, this is a little extraordinary because usually Moshe was given the Torah and was given the law with the little itsy-bitsy details. So if something presented itself, he could make a decision by using those itsy-bitsy details. But something about what was happening here, he felt probably that he didn't have the details to work with. So he decides to ask Hashem. So Moses brought their case before the Lord. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, Tzlofchad's daughters speak justly. Now this is very, very strong. Why is this amount of strength needed, do you think, in a situation like this?
Because there's a lot of custom.
Yeah, that's so contrary to anything they know.
Right.
It's in
The norm.
There's custom.
What was the Hebrew word for like what?
Do you want me to say it in Hebrew?
Yeah, what word did they use?
Ken.
So because Judaism is based on justice, I mean a lot of our stuff is based on law.
Right, but I think one of the things that's very important in this passage is that the direct voice of God was needed in this situation. It couldn't be learned from something else, either because there wasn't something else to learn from, or because custom was so strong. We're also talking about something that's financial, and taking away money, taking away strength, taking away financial security is something that doesn't happen so quickly, so easily. So there's a need here for God to say, yes, the daughters of Tzlofchad speak truthfully. There is justice in what they are asking for. So not only did the 5 of them approach the whole congregation and speak out, but when Moshe comes back, he gives the answer before the whole congregation also. So that no one is mistaken. No one can go home and tell his friend what he heard, and then his friend will say, well, I'm not so sure you heard it correctly. It can't be that God really meant that these women will have a piece of land. And so the details follow. You see? Tzlofchad's daughters speak truthfully, speak justly. You shall certainly give them a portion of inheritance along with their father's brothers, and you shall transfer their father's inheritance to them. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. If he has no daughter, you shall give over his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, you shall give over his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father has no brothers, you shall give over his inheritance to the kinsman closest to him in his family, who shall inherit it. This shall remain a decreed statute as the Lord commanded Moses. Now this is, I think you can even hear in the words how strong this is. So these 5 young women came together and decided to approach the congregation to talk about an injustice that they were going through, but they did not do it personally, they did it publicly, and the outcome was a public decree for any woman who would be in the same situation. You know, when you say the private is political, right? The personal is political. So this is it. They looked at what they were going through and they understood that this needs to be rectified. This needs to be different. Now, if you take a look on your second page, or the other side of the page, you'll see that I brought 2 midrashim, 2 different commentaries. One, an older commentary, and one, a newer commentary, excuse me. This story is a story that's been looked at for many, many, many years because it's so different than a lot of stories. So the first is Sifri. Sifri numbers, we're talking something that was written about 300, 350 AD. So it's really, really old. And Sifri asks the question, and his daughters' names were Machla, Noah, Chogla, Milka, and Tirza. And they ask, she who is named first, is she first in actions as well? Because usually when you see a list, we'd assume that Machla is, she's written first, she's probably the oldest, right? But what's interesting is that their names are recited 3 times in the Torah. And they are not always in the same order. So the Sifri, looking at it, asks, why do they turn the order around? Either she's the oldest or not. And the answer, for we have their names in a different order. Machla, Tirza, Chogla, Milka, and Noam married their cousins. Remember I told you that the Torah will say who they married. What's the answer? We learn that they were all equal. The Sifri is concerned with the order of the names. But the outcome of that, the answer, is that when you mix everyone around, then what you're saying is that they're all equal in the contribution that they gave to this coming together and making change. Now, I'm sure you all know that because I'm sure that a lot of things that you do together as a group. And then there's always the question of, who are we going to mention, and who's going to be first, second, or third? And then a lot of times you'll say, wait, this person did this and this person did that. And the Sifri is saying, not only are they equal in their contribution, but had they not come together, it would not have happened. There is not one person here who was the most important person and they're just adjacent to that. There's not this one sister that she was it and all the rest just followed. No, they are equal. They all came together, they all joined hands, and the outcome is because they came together. Yes?
Which is also completely countercultural, right? That like also the first child should also get usually like all the kavod, and so here like the Sifri is like doubling down on the countercultural nature of this episode to say they really they were completely egalitarian in every way. So I'm interested to know like why do they lift that up? Like why are they highlighting that?
I'll just